Okay, we're back online after having the internet drop out. My apologies for that. I've got some ongoing technological issues that I've been talking to technical support people left, right and centre about, but we don't seem to be able to find out exactly what's going on. So my apologies for the technical hitch, but we'll go back to, we don't even know where we were quite, do we, Peter?
Well, I was talking about my one of my
The
patients. Her
story.
name was Ali,
Yeah.
and shared a story. So I'll just repeat it, just in case it dropped. Anyway, Ali was a dog of my client who I really much cared about, and both of them actually. And I decided to take Ali for a walk because she apparently was aggressive. So I took her for a walk in a beautiful canyon with a lot of trails and river and also many dogs. And Ali was absolutely fine on the walk with my dog and other dogs, and she was greeting them and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as we were driving back to the house of my client, she attacked my dog. So there was possibly a protective issue or behavior, but I do feel that many people are so, I'm just going to say, many people are so unsorted about their aggression or anger in general. Okay, so they any hint of anything they see, they kind of flip out.
Yep.
Second, dogs really do need to say hello, and we know many dogs that actually are aggressive in quotes only when they're on the leash because they're not giving the freedom to say hello and sniff the butt and
Yep.
and say hi and wag the tail. So it can be really problematic, and not all dogs are like that, but I dare to say that 9 out of 10 dogs would be exactly like that. They just need to be given the opportunity to say hello to other dogs and they'd be fine. The other thing that happens when dogs growl or they jump in another dog or something like that, people actually start reacting and they kind of heighten the intensity of the situation. So when I see that my dog is actually interacting with another dog that is actually maybe a little rough or something like that, there's a limit to what I would allow, but I do my best to actually step aside and let them sort it out. And
Yep.
most
Yep.
of the time they are fine. So it's complicated because our society is used to bottling our emotions up.
Yes.
We are not used to expressing our emotions, and our dogs are like that too, right? Like they do express them, but then they're suppressed immediately. So it's like a pressure cooker. It does build up, and eventually it leads to bad habits and chronic behavior that is not really good for anyone. And the only other thing that I would like to add, that I really disagree with those people who say, well, my dog is not aggressive, so all the dogs should be on the leash. It's like saying, well, another person committed a crime and everyone will go to prison or everyone will be restricted because, one person did something.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and really, like, so many people have the opinion that dogs should be on leash to maintain the order, but it
Yeah.
is actually an excessive control that leads to more problems. And this is not just about dogs, but generally in our society, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, another problem that feeds into this is that a lot of humans don't know how to treat their dogs in the way that dogs need to be treated to be good citizens, as in that they don't
Mm-hmm.
understand dog body
Mm-hmm.
language, they don't understand
Mm-hmm.
dog
Mm-hmm.
communication. Humans are terrible at expressing healthy boundaries with their dogs. They don't know how to train their dogs, and then these dogs, if they let run off lead, can cause big problems. Like I remember one time when I was in the dog park, and this was with Mitzi and Pearl, my little fluffy guy, my whippet. Now Mitzi at that time was pretty reactive with other dogs, so he's okay. He's a lot better now. He can interact with other dogs in the dog park pretty well, and it's rare that I have to step in. But at that time, I'd often have to pick him up because he would go into hyperarousal and go nutso pretty quickly with other dogs. And this Staffy just appeared out of nowhere and blindsided us, came in at 100 miles an hour and basically rolled Mitzi over. And the owner was
Mm-hmm.
100 metres away,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, I think too there has to be some level of responsibility to have that freedom in terms of people actually being able to have a recall on their dog and being able to get their dog to come back when they call them, so their dog. And, you know, these dogs, it's not really their fault because they've never had an opportunity to develop healthy manners or to be trained properly because of the ignorance of their humans in a lot of ways, even though the humans wouldn't think they were ignorant. And often then when I tell that person to get their dog, they tell me to F off. My dog's in the dog park. So, you know, it leads to all sorts of other things, and I totally hear about the freedom, and I agree with that, but at the same time, with greater freedom comes greater responsibility, I believe. If you're going to have
I agree with you 100%. 100%. That so many people... I actually believe that every dog lover really wants to do well, right, for their dog, and well, like I would say that most people do, and I don't doubt that at all. But at the same time, people do not. You talk about recall. Um, it drives me crazy when I see people in the park calling their dog in such a way that their dog basically learns to ignore the recall or the calling. Like, I know that some people are against dog treats, but I think that recall should be trained initially in the house, where you call the dog's name, and when they actually even look at you, give them a treat. Then when they come from a meter, give them a treat, and continue that. But never repeat the recall over and over, especially when the dog doesn't come or when the situation is too difficult for them. Like, you can't really teach a dog a recall when there is 5 other dogs playing and you want them to come back, right? And also, it's good to call our dogs, and when they have a relatively or reasonably good recall, call them and release them, because when we just call them and they know it's the end of the fun time, we preset ourselves to failure.
That's a really good point.
Not repeating the recall, making sure that we really practice and imprint the brain, right? We are programming our dogs. We are doing nothing else than programming our dogs. So if we program them in a safe environment of our house or the backyard, then it's much easier to actually recall them in more difficult situations. Also, we expect 6-month-old dogs to be absolutely perfect, which is unreasonable. I would not be recalling my dog if he's playing with other dogs. I would not let him, though, play with other dogs in a safe environment, right? So there's so many decisions that we have to make. And if there's one thing that I would like everyone to remember, is not to repeat the recall over and over, especially if a dog learned to ignore it, and start from the scratch, and be a responsible dog lover. It's complicated. It's like with kids. It's just...
Well, I think dogs in general have got a cognitive level of somewhere around a 3 to 6 year old human being on average. I mean, some are much smarter than that. You get the whole bell curve of IQ in dogs as you do in humans, and some are probably a little bit less intelligent, right?
I dare to suggest that most dogs will actually be better in a company of other dogs than most people do. It's but I agree with you in practical terms. I think you're absolutely correct. It makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated with behavior in animals because they're so much better at non-verbal communication and understanding than us. You know, they're essentially, their whole 99% of their communication is non-verbal, whereas with humans, well, it varies what they say, how much is verbal and non-verbal in humans. It's some people say that it's 90% non-verbal or 80% or 70%, but it's still a large proportion of our communication as humans is non-verbal, but we're very unconscious about our non-verbal communication, and I find when I show clients how to talk to their dogs without their mouth, often really beautiful things happen with behavior problems, because suddenly the dog's going, oh, the human's listening to me, and they're communicating. Oh, they're talking dog, I can understand what they're talking about, right? Because humans just keep talking, and the dogs, most of our talking for dogs is just blah 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 blah. Humans making a noise.
It's I'm sometimes surprised, or entertained by people talking in full sentences to their dogs. And I know that the energy of the sentence can actually get transferred. But, talking to a puppy and saying, Fido, you cannot do this. Like, why did you go off road here when I told you not to, right? Dogs just don't really know and understand that. So it's we have to remember that dogs are dogs and they're not human.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they're very much in tune with us and they reflect who we are and how we behave to them. And, the other thing is force, right? I think that our dogs get anxious when they're mistreated. They're very sensitive. And it's complicated. Dog behavior is complicated.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite behaviors that you would recommend to people?
Behaviorists.
Like people who teach people how to treat their dogs, how to train their dogs.
Um, Brenda Alof's a really good trainer in the States who's got an amazing some really good books on dog training. She's got a great book which is all pictures of dog body language and communication, so so that you can get a better understanding of really understanding what dogs' movements, body posture, expressions and all that sort of stuff mean. So it's a big book. It's like full of pictures, big, large book. It's got a lot of really good information in it.
What was her name again?
Brenda Alof, I think it is.
I hope.
I'll just have a double check in my emails. I think it's Alof. Yeah, Brenda Alof.
I'll have to check her out.
Aloff.
I love. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I will check her out.
Yeah, and I teach people a lot about this stuff in my online trainings in terms of how to express healthy boundaries, how to get your dog so that you can touch them all over, because you need to be able to do that to be able to care for them properly, right? And a lot of dogs, you can't do that either.
Healthy boundaries. I agree with you that sometimes people let dogs get away with the murder, and then we have to get them in the clinic, and we realize they've never been handled. They've never been handled their feet or their mouth, and so handling dogs early, and just kind of be patient. Like I'm not sure what you do when you need to handle a dog that is squirmy, but what I kind of try to do is, let's say that this is a dog extremity. Okay, sorry, I have to. So let's say that the dog tries to move away from. I actually go with him a little bit and then bring him back, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not showing it in the camera because I'm trying to.
So
basically, try to make them feel like I'm not totally fighting with them, but try to go with them a little bit and then back, right, to the direction where I need them to be. Or when they want to get up, and I have them on the side, and I need to do an exam, I kind of let them get up a little bit, but then gentle, just kind of convince them to go back down. And I do that movement back and forth several times until they kind of settle. And most of the time they settle. Or, I've had a few dogs. I remember these two chows, I think. There were two chows. And they were so hard to handle and a little aggressive. And I used to have them come in the exam room, and I would sit on the floor with them, and I would tell the owner, okay, I'm just going to hold the harness, and I will pretend that I'm absolutely inert, like I will not be reacting, right? So the dog would be kind of flailing, and I would be just breathing, like doing a yoga style breathing. And it would be so interesting how these dogs would just kind of eventually melt and
absolutely.
just kind of melt into the energy, as opposed to fighting with them and holding them and pinning them down. It can be really problematic. And that's why that's one of the reasons I'm actually super upset about the COVID rules now, because many dog lovers are not allowed to come in the clinic, and dogs are handled without them being in. And I think it's time to actually really stop that, because number one, dogs are super anxious and upset about being without their people. And when I came to Canada in the early 90s, I had this really horrible, terrifying experience by working for before I got my license in Canada in the early 90s, I worked for a veterinarian who actually physically abused the animals. And I was actually shocked because I was fresh in Canada and I was seeing this person actually really abusing the animals. Uh, it took sometimes to actually grab his hand and actually prevent him from doing that, right? Which was uncomfortable on its own, but we have to have our priorities straight. But what I want to say is no dog lover should trust any other person handling their dog 100% correctly and right. And that's why I think that we have the right to actually be in the practice when dogs are handled, examined, when they're sedated for a procedure, maybe not beyond that, but really trying to reduce and minimize the likelihood of the animal being actually mishandled, and also the likelihood and possibility of these animals being stressed, because these issues are real. And there can be an overworked veterinarian who has a short fuse, and you have an animal that is being pinned down or mishandled in such a way that it's really serious. And I know that some people or colleagues may be upset with me saying that, but it's no different than any other, a medical doctor, right? Like we've seen a history of abuse in different areas of medicine, and it's super important for dog lovers to insist that they should be actually with their animals as far as it's reasonable and sensible, right?
I hear you, and I'm in the context of working in a clinic at the moment, day and a half a week, where we're not allowing clients into the clinic because if we have someone with COVID come into the clinic, it means that the clinic's going to have to be completely shut for a week, and from a business point of view, that's kind of pretty bad, right?
Yeah.
So, and I actually got exposed. I got exposed to a client with COVID 3 or 4 weeks ago and had to isolate for 2 weeks. So then I didn't get paid for my veterinary work at the clinic for 2 weeks because, and this was an animal that needed to be euthanized. It was a very difficult situation, right? But that person had been tested for COVID that morning and was supposed to be isolating. So it's complicated and difficult, and yeah, but I agree with you too, and sometimes the circumstances make that really bloody difficult to do from the point of view of working in the clinic, because what do you do?
I got fired up about this topic, and I apologize that
No, it's okay. It's good to be fired.
I am kind of emotional about it because I think that there is a sensible, I think that we need to really navigate our life with a little bit more common sense. And I do believe that, at least in Canada, I don't speak for Australia because you guys are in a different phase of COVID. You got it later and so on. But I do think that sometimes it's just a matter of convenience that many practices just simply don't like people coming in because it's inconvenient. It's one more thing to manage. And I agree that, it's not sometimes easy to have dog lovers and animal lovers in the clinic.
Well,
but I think that it's kind of also part of our job to actually look after the animals in such a way.
But our experience in the hospital is that it's actually harder, and it takes us more time not to have the people coming in with their animals.
Mm-hmm.
It adds time to our day. It makes our job harder to have only the animals and not the humans coming in. There's no doubt of that. And my boss was just saying the other day how she's really struggling because she's not getting to actually have connection with the owners of the animals. Mm-hmm. So there's lots of problems here, but she's also saying, well, if we've got with restrictions easing, there is the pandemic sort of tearing through the unvaccinated population here, and there's a very real possibility, with me being exposed to that person at work, they had to shut down the clinic for 3 days with that because all the staff had to get tested. They had to wait till the results came back, and they had to have the whole clinic deep cleaned before they were allowed to reopen. So, and now the rules are if anyone with COVID came into the clinic, then everyone in the clinic all the staff in the clinic would have to isolate completely for a week, which would mean that the business would have to close, and how many other animals then wouldn't get care? So there's a whole lot of really difficult things around this, and at the same time I totally agree with you. Animals absolutely should be coming in with their humans. It's so much better for everyone when that can happen. And yeah, it's just
it's complicated.
It's super complicated and hard, yeah.
So let's hope that it's not going to last very long and that we can get back to normal.
Relative normality, yeah. Who knows? But, you know, it's all behaviour, isn't it? It's all about our behaviour and the animals' behaviour and the behaviour of the vets with the animals. And, you know, I think a lot of what we've talked about today in this interrupted session together has been really, really fascinating and rich in terms of talking about how we need to socialise our puppies really beautifully when they're little, and how we need to care for ourselves, because if we've got any suppressed anger or shame or anything like that, it really affects our animals very, very intimately. And
you know, they say that the degree of evolution of a nation